Did
I
I
printed.
circulate those?
You did.
Okay.
You did, so I read them ahead of time. Move this meeting along.
Yeah, trying to here.
Well done.
Does, anyone have any thoughts or discussion on the minutes from the last meeting?
Hey, do you want to see it?
Roberta, anything
I
on the
thought they
minutes?
were fine.
Okay, do you want to make a motion?
Move to accept the meeting for minutes from the October 9th meeting.
Moving?
I moved it.
Okay, I second.
Thank you.
Any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Yes.
Aye. Okay. Approved. I'm not sure if these are gonna be made available online or not, but I'll send them to
Send it
the
to
town
Debbie.
manager, town administrator's office, yeah, Debbie.
Yeah, she does everything like that, and she's very efficient. I think it was thunder.
I think they might be meeting the Board of Appeals meeting tonight upstairs.
Yeah.
That's what it is, yeah.
Oh, are they meeting up in the C, oh, they're meeting in the
The
COA.
Yeah.
Oh.
Just send it.
Okay,
COA meeting room.
all right, so the next task is identifying questions for elected boards and chairpersons.
I would like to insert a comment that I know that Mark Lyons has said he wants this before town meeting, or the results, and I'd like to say that the town voted the article that gave us 10 months, and I think that we need to take that time, because we may be making changes or recommendations that are gonna last for a long time, and I think that trying to squish it into 5 months.
So I agree with the premise that we want to get this right. We ourselves are not making any changes. All we're doing is making recommendations, and at most, it would be taken under the advisement of the board, and then if they decide to do something, they would have to draft something with the help of town council, and probably go to the state legislature. So we're a long way off, and I agree completely with the sentiment that we want to get this right. And honestly, as I started thinking about these questions more and the amount of work that we have ahead of us, I don't know if it's possible we can get through 5 months, and maybe that's where your thought
That's
process
right.
was from.
Right, really, yeah, I totally agree, I think we need to get it right, and that's going to take time.
And on, as to these questions, so I wrote down several questions within the questions. I can pass those out if you want to see them. I know from the questions that I drafted and presented, or can present right now, they need to be simplified and organized better. And I thought maybe we all need to exchange questions and figure out which ones are the ones we want to ask, and compile them somehow. And you know, there's going to be some overlap, I would think, between questions that we've all prepared. And we're supposed to have the discussion about the questions at an open meeting. So right there, it's not something that we can just put together. I don't expect any vote on the questions tonight. We all have to have time to read each other's questions and formulate how we want to move this forward. So.
I wonder also, maybe we can do this in conjunction, etc., but I, for one, would like to understand the government as it is right now.
Okay.
And as if it's the back of my hand. Yes, I know we have selectmen, yes, I know we have a town administrator, yes, I know we have this, the clerk is now appointed, not elected, et cetera, but I don't know it so well that I can really comment on it and say, well, why don't we do it this way? Or, you know, and to get to that point of questions, why don't we do it this way, et cetera, I just feel, we feel much more comfortable knowing it very, very well.
I went through an exercise this week that sort of ties into that. From my wonderful corporate experience, I decided that we needed an org chart. And so I got information from several different sites and talked to some people and tried to put together an org chart. There's no software made that would be able to put together an org chart for this kind of government. So I ended up with two different things that we can talk about or not talk about now. But it was, I think it's a first step in that way, just to understand
Yeah.
what the big makeup of organization of the government is.
Right, who reports to whom?
Exactly.
Who's appointed, who's elected?
And some of that is that, I divided it into two different things I could do. What elected boards appoint whom, and the other one was, for lack of a better word, and there probably is a better word, it was reporting and supervisory structure.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So we have to report to somebody, or the town employees have to report to
Yes.
somebody. There's a chain of command.
Yes, well, it's a,
So, I don't know, so we all definitely need to have a baseline of knowledge as to how the town government works, but I don't know if that's something we can have happen at a meeting. It's almost like something that you need to brush up on in all your spare time.
Mhm.
Good sources, or that handbook that you have,
Yes.
does that helps
This is the
organize
handbook.
things.
Right.
But there's, the Mass Municipal Association, which publishes that handbook, has all other sources as well, more general and less detailed, that give good background. Town's bylaws are a good resource. This organizational chart will help. But generally, the organization is, the structure is consistent with all the general laws, and I don't expect anyone here to brush up on all the general laws to figure out how each board, which each board's powers and responsibilities are. To the extent I can be a resource. To the extent we need to have town council come in, we can have town council come in. You know, I have people who are involved in town government and volunteer on boards, whether they're a town employee or a board or an official. It takes years for people to sometimes put that all together, that big picture. So that's not something that can necessarily happen overnight. But we have to know it.
Perhaps, I do, I agree, and I understand that it is an individual time, et cetera, to look at all the different areas of governments. But maybe we can have 10 minutes for a meeting, whether it's the end, if there are any questions. Does anybody know about such and such?
Sure.
And just between us, share our knowledge, or share what we've learned, or share what we've stumped on.
Does it make sense to have it may make sense to have that type of discussion precede our discussion on, suggestions and recommendations regarding the organizational structure. If we need to do that now first, then we can do that as well. But, I didn't put that specifically on the agenda tonight, and so it might be more beneficial for people to have a chance to bone up on that information before we have that discussion. So maybe I could put it on the next meeting agenda and we can start the meeting off with that.
That'd be great, yes. I like that.
So. I don't necessarily want to have town council come in more than once, but I do
No.
think that she's going to have to come in eventually.
At some point,
but
but,
when we get more to the point where we're actually asking questions that are legal questions and.
right. Do you have that, excuse me, do you have that org chart, or the two org charts? So that you
I
could
do, and I can hand,
email it to us, or?
I could email them, yes, I have hard copies here if you'd like the hard copy.
Oh, great, yeah.
Do you have one for everybody?
Yeah,
Oh, it's awesome.
okay, this is the first one that talks about, what elected boards appoint, who's appointed by an elected board.
Okay.
And what elected board appoints whom.
So I think that this is
I don't
good.
have enough for everybody, but you can,
Oh, thank you.
This isn't specifically on the
Yeah,
agenda.
we can share this one, Roberta.
I didn't get that one.
You take a
no,
look.
I haven't,
Yes.
I've got this part. And this is the one that is my attempt at saying, I think I gave you,
They
Oh,
have
oh,
the
you-
same one there.
okay, you have that one, you have that one, they have that one, okay, you don't have this one.
I have an extra one, actually, I need to give these to David too. We need it.
And we'll want one for Dave.
Indeed,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I can hold.
Did you email these already to me?
No, I didn't email them to you.
So if you could just,
I will email them.
and that,
Okay, so-
that reminds me, so any of the materials we use at this meeting are public records that we have to keep with the minutes of the committee. And with regard to public records, retention and accessibility for town administration, I think it makes sense, in particular for emails. You can use my personal email address, but always copy the town email address. That way
want this
it'll
one
be on the
back?
server,
You can
if the town can access that, it'll be stored in accordance with
Something happens to
the,
you, somebody else.
if I ever get hit by a bus and, or, you know, so the town needs access to it, so. And I'll try to remember to tell that to David too when he gets here. So something like this, if you could, please, email these to me with a CC to the town email address.
When you say the town email address, what do you mean?
The lross@topsfield.mass.
Thank you.
So you're keeping our documents for now in that L. Ross?
Well, no, so, I want all communications via email to go through the official town, email address, so the town has records and copies
So
of
that's the
everything.
L. Ross,
Yes, well, my other one's L. Ross too, but it's.
Topsfield.gov.
Yes, yeah, that one.
Thank you for this. I think this is going to be very helpful.
Yeah, it is, it is.
So, and not only do we need the org chart though, and at some point we might want to fill this in with what their responsibilities are.
Sure, that can be an easy
Yeah.
stepping stone. I could just add right onto this document.
This is a PowerPoint? Or what is this?
No, it's in Word, it's in, I don't know, some, what's the name of it?
It's a text boxes?
Yeah, it's in Word.
Okay.
It can go into a PowerPoint presentation, but I created it in Word, and it's one of the graphic add-ons to Word. Smart graphics or something. It's a part of Word, so it's not some.
So you can add to this.
I can add to it, yes, I can figure out how to do that.
Okay.
And I just noticed I put 2019, I'm living in the future on the other one, so I'll correct that.
But you also put drafts, that's okay.
I did put draft. I didn't want anyone to look at this and say, oh, you don't have.
So, well, someone has any questions about these handouts, I think this is something that we can study on our own time to understand how town government works, or is currently organized. By far, the Board of Selectmen have the most responsibilities of all these different boards. We might also want to add to these charts whether they're appointed or elected boards.
Yeah, well, the one that says Topsfield appointments by elected boards, but we can certainly indicate that more graphically on it. This other one is only the appointments by elected boards. They don't have on there the non-elected boards like COA, Health, Conservation. Those aren't on there.
But they report to somebody,
But
right? Like the COA
they report
to,
the Board of Selectmen, but their employee, technically dotted line to the town administrator, to the Board of Selectmen.
Some boards have employees or agents who are dedicated to serving that board. Some boards don't. And that's part of, what we'll need to understand, but I don't want to go too far down the road of starting to investigate personnel.
right.
Because we're not really talking about that. And I have these, which I only have one copy of, we can share, that I got from Kelly, I think Saturday or Sunday. I'm going to share this with you, Roberto. But this will be helpful. In fact, I'll give this to you. I can put that another copy. And what this does is,
Oh, yeah, this,
take tables of,
yeah,
you know, elected officials,
Yeah.
appointed officials, who reports to who. So this is a good resource to start with.
yeah. It's a different, it's kind of a different presentation than what I did. This is, here's the elected officials, boards and commissions. Those are all the elected ones. And then the elected officials, boards and commissions by function. Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And the next one says the appointed officials, so some of the boards appoint people. Obviously, the Board of Selectmen appoint people. And then we'll have another page about the Board of Selectmen. Oh, okay, good.
Do you have this on email?
I do, and I can share that with everybody. Those are, like Roberta's, they're drafts,
That's fine. Just to have.
but it's gonna be something I think we'll need to look at and refine
Mhm.
as we go forward.
Okay.
Can you get that all on one page?
Well, that,
That's a challenge.
that is the challenge. Like I said, I don't know of any software product that lets you do that. Have to be. All right, so do I have a takeaway from this to do for the next meeting?
Not yet. I think what we need to do is have the discussion about basic town governance and maybe what would be useful as far as visuals to present that, you know, for our use and to present that to people as well.
Mhm.
So I think that's what I think should happen. So I don't think we have any action items on that tonight.
Okay.
So does anyone have a list of questions that they would like to circulate, other than me?
I have 2 questions, but I do not make copies for
Yeah,
it.
I didn't,
Okay.
I really either.
So why don't we just go around the table and talk about questions then? If you want to start.
I'm happy to start. I can hand this around. So my 2 questions are, what advantages and what disadvantages do you anticipate if town government were reorganized, so more departments reported directly to the town administrator? That was one question. Second question is, what shortcomings, if any, do you see in the existing structure of town government? And how do you think those shortcomings could be addressed structurally? And I'm happy to email those to everyone so we have a comprehensive list. So my 2 questions, one is asking specifically about a strong town administrator, and the second is just an open-ended question is, what shortcomings do you see with our current structure?
I like that, it's simple, and,
Deliberately open-ended.
yes.
Yeah. One is kind of direct, you're asking specifically about one possible outcome, but the other one is very open-ended, so.
Well, that was deliberate because I thought it was, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought it was suggested explicitly to consider that
Yes,
particular
yeah.
outcome. So I
Yes.
thought, rather than beat around the bush,
Might
just
throw it out
ask it
there.
out there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But ask for both pros and cons.
So I think at the end of this discussion, or at the end of this meeting at some point, we'll ask, you know what?
I will.
I'll ask everyone just to email each other's questions,
Mhm.
and we're gonna have to figure out how to narrow down that list and just look at my own questions, simplify it. And then we're gonna have to take a vote on it eventually. So, I mean, that discussion has to happen at a meeting, but we can at least distribute those materials for discussion at the meeting. I just ask that all these questions that we're talking about tonight, once they're circulated, not be talking about again until we're at another meeting of the board, this committee. So, yeah.
Well, my approach was a little more, maybe global, in that I thought, well, first we have to tell them who we are.
Right, well, yes, an introduction.
This might be very
No,
simplistic.
no,
but-
I like that. We need to do an introduction of what our purpose is
Yeah.
and why we're contacting them,
Yeah,
sure.
and certainly it would be nice if we all said basically the same thing about what our purpose was. We don't have to use the same words, we need to get
No.
the same point apart.
I do that.
Yeah.
Point across. And the other thing was to say what we had said at last meeting, that I think that this is a review of the structure and not of any personnel
That
pluses
should,
or minuses.
that should absolutely be in the sort of purpose statement.
Yeah,
I think we
yeah.
need that.
And then the other part was something else we talked about last week, but it says, what you tell me, of course, will be or could be compiled into a centralized record, which then would be public. Just, I think they need to know that. And then basically, that was sort of the general. Then it went down to them specifically in that asked a general question about your board. Are you elected? Are you appointed? Number of members, number of employees that are in your area of responsibility.
Well, that will work with, you know, if we ask that question of the board of selectmen, they'll say all of them. So,
Yeah.
just
yeah.
almost all.
Yeah, well, it's more, I think it gives, like if you're talking to someone like, I don't know, the assessors, okay? It gives them the opportunity to say, you know, we appoint the assessor and the assistant assessor and,
So maybe it would be, who do you appoint and who do you work with? Maybe those
yeah,
are the
yeah,
questions.
yeah, that would be good. Okay, and then the next was getting down, I think it's very similar to what you said. I said, what changes in town government structure would make your area of responsibility easier? And then the last one was, what's working, what's not working? So basically, those are very similar to these questions, but I didn't mention the stronger town administrator at all. That wasn't, those words aren't in my question.
Okay. Take over then.
Okay, I got more specific, I didn't do generals as much. For any of the areas of government, I asked, how would you prioritize your duties and responsibilities? How often do you meet? What's the preparation for these meetings and what is the follow-up? What is the scope of your authority? How are the decisions made? And how are goals decided and reached? Then I went to Board of Selectmen, because I'm a little more familiar with that body. What has changed in your duties and responsibilities since the town administrator was established? Do you feel the Board of Selectmen has ceded too many duties to the town administrator? What are your thoughts on having 3 or 5 selectmen? Why is the expanded board beneficial to the town? Should there be a means or bylaw to replace a selectman who stops attending meetings? Do you favor a strong or weak Board of Selectmen, weak meaning town officials are elected, strong meaning town officials are appointed?
So when you say town officials, do you mean, which officials do you mean? Do you have any in particular in mind?
No, just that, okay, we have the clerk who used to be elected, and now the clerk is appointed. Okay, so that's.
Yeah,
fine.
so that was the genesis of that question, basically, is we wanted to make sure.
I know, actually, I read it here,
Okay.
that it's was considered a weak, quote-unquote, weak Board of Selectmen is where the town officials are elected, and they don't have as much power to appoint. Whereas a strong would be having the power to appoint.
So if you brought it back to our situation, our Board of Selectmen is a weak Board of Selectmen because there's so many elected officials,
Now,
boards,
plus and
etc.
minus of that, you know, I mean, I'm sure everyone would have an opinion on that. I mean, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, no, so essentially it's ways to reorganize could include centralizing power in one board. One of the communities I work with, the Board of Selectmen acts as water and sewer commissioners, Board of Park and Cemetery commissioners, road commissioners. They basically, all the executive functions are consolidated and centralized in one board, which has its pluses and minuses. They have oversight of everything, essentially, but they also know how everything fits together. So that's the advantage. And I also see communities that do it where those responsibilities are all centralized in a town manager by a charter. So maybe what we need to think about is, a form of that question is centralizing. Do we wanna centralize it, powers and responsibilities? And, what are the pluses and minuses in doing so?
Yeah, I think it's a big question. And, yeah, that sort of gets to the heart of the matter. More
Mhm.
government, less government, more elected officials, so you have more citizens say, or is that inefficient? I don't know.
Well, I will say in that one town where everything's centralized in one board of selectmen, there are more committees and subcommittees that you can shake a stick at, so, you know.
So is
And
that really efficient?
it eventually becomes so much for that one board that they have to
Yeah.
delegate, but eventually they make their own decisions.
Yeah, well, certainly you could, that just makes sense. Right now, you've got multiple boards of experts managing very specific areas. If you put it all together, then you're gonna need some help managing those specific areas.
Right.
Exactly, yeah. But is it, I think both need to be looked at. And that's
I agree.
probably throughout, not just Board of Selectmen, but especially throughout the top set of commissions.
Yeah,
Well, we're not such a large community yet that we have a lot of issues that face these other communities. We just really don't have the size of it, we have to deal with a lot of that stuff, so. All right, so I will put on the next agenda agenda item for an overview of our current town government, how it operates. And we can have a discussion from there.
Okay.
Was that all your questions for me?
Yeah.
I don't want to read all my questions, because there are too many of them, but I will pass them out. I'm sorry I didn't steal them.
oh, the 2 pages.
There's 2 pages of questions,
Wow.
and it could be, believe me. There, at first, I was inclined to go open-ended, and then I started, the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to try to make them pointed questions, at least for our thought process, if not to hand up to, or ask to boards. So one of the things I wanted to understand better was, in particular, how much time did the board spend on discussing policy and long-term planning versus how much they spend on operational or administrative tasks?
It struck me when Libby said the word goals.
Right.
Yeah.
And somehow we have to find out what the inefficiencies are. And when I say inefficiency, the one that comes to my mind is how much overlap is there between what boards do? You know, does one board have custody of all the town's property, for example, or do other boards, and are they talking to each other and using the same personnel? Things like that. I don't necessarily want to drill down into that, but we might have to. I don't know if anyone wants to take a minute to read these, or if you want to read them on your own time, we can talk about them.
I like your operations and policy section.
Yeah, I was thinking 18, really,
I just want to make sure I understand, because for the, well, I like these questions as well. we want to make sure that we're asking about, you know, structural challenges, right? And so if the board is spending not enough time on long-range planning, for example, is that because of structure? We want to, that's what we're trying to get at the root at. Is it because of structure, or is it just because these people like to talk? All right, we just need to
Understood,
Good point.
figure that out.
yeah. And there's always more time that volunteers could spend, probably. Not all volunteers, not this committee. No, that's absolutely part of it. And what we have to get is sort of an idea. I think the question has to be asked whether or not they feel as if their time is spent on policy and planning or administrative stuff. And I don't know. If they're
And
efficient in
and
allocating
why,
their own
and
time,
and
right?
why, right.
So, and as you can see, I need to, I would like to simplify these, so your feedback at the next meeting, if you have time to review these, will be appreciated. I mean, feedback on all of our questions.
So do we want to circulate our other, should the rest of us circulate our questions too?
Yes.
We have yours, so
Yes.
everyone should just send their questions to the group without discussion, just
Without
sending the
discussion,
questions.
that's correct. So now that we've discussed the questions, we can circulate them. You know, I will email mine as well, and we're gonna have them in front of them. And we can
Just
consider,
easy to
yeah,
combine them.
combine them and consider how we wanna move this forward.
Yeah.
And I've reviewed the old Topsfield, it's the 2012, fiscal year 2012, Government Review Committee's presentations. Their approach seems somewhat different, or at least their final report. Their final report is not necessarily, like, these questions wouldn't lead to what their final report led to necessarily. So I'm not quite sure how they came up with their report. As I wasn't there to witness it. But I think that this is something that I also would like to circulate. Because this is the FY 2012 Topsfield Government Review Committee report.
That's a PowerPoint presentation, right?
It is, yes. Have you seen it?
Didn't we all get it before the first meeting?
Kelly may have,
I
may have been one of the things that Kelly.
received it before our first meeting.
Yeah,
I did,
I don't think I printed it out, but I looked at it online.
This is comes out of it.
Their report went on to talk about regionalization. I mean, I hadn't considered regionalization as something that this committee was going to discuss. I'm not saying it's not on the table, I don't think that we are at a point where this committee wants to recommend regionalization to the board of selectmen. But it's not something we should just dismiss outright.
How long is that? I think the version we got was a little bit shorter.
Well, I don't think it was that long.
I may have stapled together a couple of additional pages from what Kelly was saying.
Can I, it has,
It's about 12 feet.
yeah, it has the one I'm talking about had an org chart in it that was,
I have it
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
it
It was
it was a proposed workshop.
proposed for a new organization, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think we have that whole, I think we got that whole
Okay.
thing.
But I think we need to be familiar with this as well.
Mhm.
That's what we do.
Yep.
I'll be blind by the time this is done.
Use them. Here.
Okay.
It's a little easier to read.
Oh, is it the same one? It is.
It's the same
Great,
one.
in color.
In color.
Well, before we get off the agenda item with the questions, does anyone have any other thoughts or discussion about questions Do you wanna Roberta, take a shot at drafting a little canned introduction for the questions?
I'll do Camden's introduction,
Okay.
Thank you.
not right this minute.
No.
Are you done?
No, but I think that you were right on track with the,
Yeah, but the-
what our purpose is, and, as well as, you know, a sort of advisement that this, could be a public record or part of a public record,
Mhm.
Mhm.
so.
Yeah.
May I ask, do we think that we would send the questions to the people ahead of time to give them a chance to think about it before we actually
Yeah.
spoke to them?
Absolutely, especially if you know, if we end up with two questions,
Well,
you know, I would still wanna send it to them so they have some time to give it
Yes.
some thought.
Yeah,
But if we end up with
Makes
a
sense.
whole list of questions, then I think, yeah, they don't need it ahead of time. And I think at our last meeting, we were hoping to get this done by the holidays. I don't know.
Mm.
the interviewing done by the holiday?
Yeah, I don't know how realistic that is, but that was what we had talked about.
Well, I don't know, we might be able to.
We could start, I don't see a problem in starting,
Starting, yes.
you know, and just saying, but, there are the holidays and there are, you know, then you have to gather the information, how many people are we going to be able to do it, et cetera, et cetera.
And then once we, so I think we decided we would interview the boards or their
Mhm.
chairs.
Yeah,
And then after we interview the chairs, we might actually want to meet with the boards, and then maybe key administrative personnel.
mhm.
And so we might need to generate more questions for the personnel or boards
Yeah.
based on what we get from the chairman.
It's going to get, what will be taking time is if we interview boards, because that has to be a public meeting,
Yes.
and it has to be scheduled at their meeting time, we have to get on their agenda, most of them only meet once a month, so that would take.
Well, we
time.
could interview boards, or we could ask if they respond to a little questionnaire, in which case we have to keep it simple, but I don't know how useful that would be. I don't know how much an elected or appointed official would want to respond to that type of questionnaire.
Why wouldn't it?
Elected officials are political animals.
Okay,
Even in Topsfield.
Yeah.
they certainly are. However, with the many different boards, et cetera, it might be helpful to send them a questionnaire that was written.
Well,
And then, okay, this is our starting point, just a thought.
Well, if we send them the questions,
Mhm.
they can think
Sure.
about them, rather than having us come up with
Right.
questions and then have to come up with some sort of
Yeah,
a survey.
right,
that's almost like a, what's my line?
and asking for a written response could be problematic, I think.
You could not want to do it.
Well, I think it's easier for people to sit down with someone for an hour and have a conversation.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be person to person, we can
Mhm.
call them on the telephone.
It- And it doesn't have to be on the record. I mean, we're gonna have to come back and share discussions. People might be able to figure out who said what based on who we are tasked with interviewing. Like, you have to interview, say, the board of the chairman of the finance committee. Karen Dower to say something, and you report, well, this is what I heard. People would know who the two or three people that you were interviewing were,
Yeah.
be able to figure it out. So, it's gonna be an interesting process. Well, let's get the questions first, but keep in mind when we hone our questions, that people may be somewhat reluctant to answer them.
We'll find out.
Mhm.
Could open a can of worms, or we
Mhm.
could find out a lot. Or not so very much.
Okay. Any more discussion on the questions? So the next agenda item is investigating Topsfield town government effectiveness and efficiency. I don't know how much we have to add to this. My thought in putting this on the agenda was, we basically need to have this on pretty much each agenda as we move forward and think about how we want to do our fact finding. I don't think anything's changed since last meeting.
I'd just like to say that this is what I found. I sent it to you. It's an incredible amount of information about how towns are run. That's where I got the strong and weak board of selectmen. I've just started, and I'm happy to email it to you.
Yeah, if you could do that, the link.
Not a problem. I had it printed at Staples, just because I like the printed word.
Yeah.
And I wasn't about to try it, but it is 250 pages. But there's so much information in it, it's well worth looking at. And then I think you can get even more questions from reading that information.
I'm sure that will be helpful. Lou, I'm struggling with how one measures effectiveness and efficiency.
I don't know. It might just be anecdotal. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
We're not gonna have numbers or data.
No.
Right. So it might just be a gut check, right?
Yeah,
That
yes.
people say, yeah, our meetings are,
If 5 out of 10
Not
people
efficient.
complain about how things are not getting done, you know, that might be, I mean, we might be the complaint department.
yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Been that
But you
before.
learn a lot.
Yeah, what else is there?
Yeah. You still learn from negative input.
If we look at, this is maybe an aside, you can skip it if you don't want to talk about it, but I took a quick look as I was going through putting together this org chart of how many people we would have to interview. And it's the boards, the elected boards and the BOS, that's about 14 people. You're gonna interview them all separately. And then you get on to the next level, like the head of the finance committee and the supervisors of highway, blah, blah, blah. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. You've got 13 people there.
That's all the boards? Is that like Board of Health as well and Conservation Commission?
Yeah,
Is that
well,
all the boards?
first is the elected boards. There's
Okay.
14 elected people. And maybe you could take out trust
Including the
funds.
moderator?
Including the moderator. So it's Board of Selectmen moderator, Board of Assessors, Planning Board, Highway, Water, Parks and Cemetery, Library, Trust Funds, and School Committee, if we're gonna do the school committee.
I think
That's
we should-
14. Go ahead. Okay, that's 14. And then if you get to that next layer below them, so then you have finance, then the superintendents of water, highway, and Parks and Cemeteries, the library director, the fire chief, the police chief, the COA, got her there twice, Conservation Commission, Board of Health, superintendent of schools, and then the town administrator.
Well, I think not all, so, you know, that's 26, so it's like
Yeah.
about 5 each, if we were to do it that way. Not all boards and officials are created equal, obviously. You know, the elected boards carry more weight. And the board of selectmen, the water commissioners in particular, have a lot more responsibility, wider responsibility.
Yeah. So you could just look, you could just put 14 elected people. You could take out, nothing against them, the trust funds maybe. They don't appoint anybody. And the school committee, if you decided not to do that, but you're still at 12.
Well, so the school committee, I'd be inclined to talk with the chair, because I think it's part of our due diligence, but they have they have a lot of organizational support. They have superintendents, they have assistant superintendents, they have,
But they have their own
they're their
full-
own entity
Yeah,
unto
with
themselves.
facilities
Yes.
and
And
support staff.
I think that we should include Masco School Committee, because they all go back to the Board of Selectmen.
The Masco School Committee does not, it's a
No, that's
separate
true,
regional
it doesn't.
district, so,
But they're elected.
but they're elected, but they don't report to us.
We don't have
We
any.
don't have any say, town meeting votes to appropriate money to run Masco, but we don't have any control of
Okay,
entity other than,
but the school committee,
the elementary school committee.
Yeah.
So maybe we need to refine that list. I think we want to talk to the chair of the board of selectmen.
Mhm.
I don't feel as if we need to talk to the moderator. Well, we could talk to the moderator since he or she appoints the finance committee. But otherwise, that's, you know, the way they run town meeting, I don't know that that's up for discussion. It's not part of the organization of town government in my mind.
but they're elected.
They're elected.
I think that's important. And they do appoint the finance committee.
That's right.
How do they do that?
That's,
How
well,
do they decide on that?
an appointment, right, and so we could,
Two levels, top line.
we could have that discussion with the current moderator.
Yeah,
I know some towns, I may have brought this up at the last meeting, one of the communities I work with, they have a 3-member committee that appoints people to the finance committee. They have the moderator, they have the chair of the board, the current chair of the board of selectmen, and the current chair of the finance committee. And that way there's some assurance of this continuity and stability with the finance committee. And so that's one way, one town. And that's in their town charter.
In our last meeting, we had talked about starting with 6 specific board chairs and then moving on to another 6 specific board
Mhm.
chairs. Not with any intention of cutting anybody out,
Mhm.
but with, oh, why don't we start with these people? And I think that's sort of a reasonable thing. Let's just start with some and go from there.
I think so too, and it may be, it may be the best way to do it, so we can learn from that experience and refine our questions and understand how to better move forward. How we choose those 6. I wouldn't start with the board of selectmen, start with some of the more, the boards that have less
More autonomy.
oversight. Well,
Those that have more autonomy, you said less oversight.
I was gonna say less, it's not, autonomy isn't the word I was looking for, less activity or coordination with town government, with other departments in the town. So like the
Like the
board of library trustees.
The library, yeah, that would be one. The other one would probably, another one that has less interaction would be water.
Well, the water is a separate enterprise. So I think that I will put them second underneath the board of selectmen. The school committees and the board of selectmen are probably the 2 big boards that we need to talk to. The school committee though, you know, it's a different entity. I don't know that even though we talk to them and they have a lot of responsibility, that we would ever, I can't imagine we're gonna suggest any type of reorganization to the schools. They're just not, it's almost not even in our charge.
Well, it's, this is what I would think. It's not that we're going to go in and reorganize the way they operate, but they do have some tie-in back to the town.
Yes.
And what would make it easier for them to interact with the town government?
yeah, I agree.
Well, their interaction with the town government, from my experience, is, you know, they share certain town-wide benefits like insurance and
Mhm.
healthcare. And, you know, they deal with the finance committee. I don't think I don't recall, I mean, that they are sometimes joint meetings with the board of selectmen. For the most part, the school committee is autonomous. I don't, you know.
I think that's state. I think I read something in there, but I can't put my finger on it. But it's, Board of Selectmen and School Committee are always Board of Selectmen and School Committee.
I think what our charge really is how do we review, what do we think about the operation of the town governance on the town administration side that does not include the school committee? I mean, the charge doesn't quite say that, but
I think we ought to interview them at some point, but, you know, they should be included, but I don't think we should give them the large, as large.
Yeah, we should find out if they have complaints, you know,
Yeah.
basically.
I think the moderator would have more information on town governance.
No, so the moderator's job really is just to run the town meeting. And once he appoints, or she appoints, the finance committee members, the really, in my experience, the moderator doesn't have any role in the discussion of town governance matters. It's just, I'm gonna appoint these people and they're gonna do this job. So, we can talk to the moderator and we can hear complaints, but to me, the moderator's role is appoint the finance committee members, run the town meeting, and get out of the way.
Okay.
That's my experience. So, do we wanna, I don't even think, it's too soon to pick who we're gonna talk to first, I think. Let's get the questions down.
Okay.
Mr. Reed has joined us. 22. Welcome aboard, or back aboard.
Just fighting another battle across the way.
So, just a quick recap for you, Dave.
Did he get both pages?
I don't know. I might have
No,
just
you-
get an extra.
It's okay. Wow.
Is this yours or her?
Yeah, you need your bifocals. He has, yeah, that's the one, yeah.
So David, what we talked about, first of all, we approved the minutes and then we were just talking about questions. We share our questions with each other.
Yep.
I think maybe we should revisit that because we're gonna ask you to email your questions around if you have them.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late, but I think that the general sense of the questions that I got last time were great, you know.
Okay, okay. So,
And I had similar questions to what you guys mentioned, so.
so
Just to recap.
we're going to be circulating our questions. If everyone wants to just send them to me, and I'll try to compile them into one big list.
Oh, rather than.
And then we'll circulate it back around and we can try to figure out which ones we want to ask.
Okay, so what email address should we use for that?
So my work email address is the one I check most frequently.
Okay,
So use that, but
that's the one that's on, that's
Yeah.
not the one that's on this.
they
It's
both
one-
start with L. Ross. So
Yeah.
one is L. Ross.
I do.
You have that.
Yeah. You've got an email from
Yeah,
it.
yeah, and then what I also said, so the town has records of all these emails, we're gonna try to CC my Topsfield email address, just so they have them as a record. All right, so that's it for the questions then. We're also gonna try to put that together. One of the other items we discussed was that, similar to what we discussed at last meeting, we're gonna try to make sure we get this right and not just get it done quickly before town meeting.
Okay.
So,
Good.
let's see. So, we're just, it seems like wrapping up discussion on investigating Topsfield town governance. Essentially, I think the general feeling is that we are looking for anecdotal evidence of how people view the town's operations, you know, from a structural, organizational standpoint, whether or not they have encountered issues with the town's current structure, or if everything is operating smoothly. And within there's some room to question how things might be improved.
And it sounds like last week we were talking, if specific people come up, we have to try to decouple that and get back to the organizational structure.
Yes, that's part of, Roberta has volunteered to put together a little introductory paragraph that will, I think, deal with that. So we ready to move on to agenda item number 5, knowledgeable of other, this is also somewhat premature since we're not really fully aware of what how our own town government works. But I put that on the agenda because eventually we're going to need to understand how our government might work better. We're gonna understand what else is out there for, how other towns operate and what their structure is, that allows them to operate, the way that they do. I found this is also a Mass Municipal, resource. Basically, it's a 3 or 4 page breakdown of what every town has for their form of governance. So eventually, we can look at this and, you know, narrow down a list of government or towns that are similar in size to Topsfield that we might want to study. You know, 5-member board of selectmen, town administrator, that type of thing. And if at some point we decide we ever want to try to study a different type of form of government, we can use this as well. So I don't know if people want me to email this or they prefer to have hard copies. I can give you either.
Put a hard copy
Okay,
on.
that was fine. Do you want to have
That's great.
everything?
Yeah, this is
Do I
really
have 5?
helpful.
Did I give someone 2?
No,
You can email if you're now without.
do you wanna?
No, I can.
You guys want a copy down here?
Thank you, yeah. Take that, we'll share.
Yeah.
Are we looking at, well, we don't know if we're looking at,
We don't know.
yeah.
Be a good reference.
Yeah, so, just as generally, the Mass Municipal Association has some pretty good resources. You can Google Mass Municipal Association and find it, play around with their information.
Rudy, is that where you found that?
Yeah, that's their
That's the
publication.
same, yeah, that's it.
They have one of those basically for, the selectmen, which is the most comprehensive, the finance committee.
Really?
Yeah, there's a,
I'll email that to you.
there's a lot of information. There's a lot of information. Now, I don't think we have the time or think there's a need for us to drill down to that level of detail.
No, but it's interesting, if
Yeah.
you're.
Yeah, if you have questions about, what the board of selectmen's role is, that's where to find the answer.
I think
Or one place to find the answer.
Like this is some like PhD thesis at the Kennedy School of Government or something.
I think,
Watch what you say.
I'm starting to think that our biggest task is just to focus, is figuring out how to focus our efforts to come up with our report. You know, focus our fact finding, focus our questions, simplify them. I mean, basically, unless you're involved in town government a lot, this, you know, knowing how town governments operate is not, does not come easy or quickly necessarily. So. Anyone have any questions about that handout I just handed out, or any other resources?
I'll just mention that in that document, 12 pager that we all got before our first meeting, there's some mention there somewhere of somebody had done some research.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I had heard that, and I'm sorry I didn't do some more research to figure it out, but the MMA did some sort of a financial management review of Topsfield at one point, and that I think it was like in 2008, and there were supposedly some suggestions in it or at the back of it that were ways that Topsfield could become more efficient.
Well, I'm not aware of a 2008 report. I know that there's been a report that recently given to the town, just a draft financial guideline that was given to the town by the Collins Center. There was a study done.
Oh, yes.
Jake, are
yeah.
you aware of a 2008 report?
There was a review by the state, one of the organizations in the state, that looked at our financial approaches to things and came back and gave us some suggestions. Essentially, we did well. It's almost like an auditor.